I'm going to start by saying that this video is about an idea rather than a build guide. That idea is to make a build that uses only one button, that has the kind of map and pack clearing of an ED Contagion build, but with better single target damage like that of a Forbidden Rite build. The way I'm trying to do that is with the new transfigured gem, Blight of Contagion. This transfigured version has overall less damage than a normal Blight gem. It only stacks to 5 instead of 20, so it ramps up faster and it has a longer duration. But the main change of this gem is that it allows the damage over time portion applied by Blight to be transferred by Contagion, just like Essence Drain is. So the goal is to channel Blight, and then with cast while channeling to trigger Forbidden Rite, and then the Forbidden Rite triggering causes damage to me, which triggers my cast when damage taken support to trigger Contagion, so that I can effectively play a one button build, a cast when channeling Forbidden Rite build, that also has a sort of built-in Essence Drain and Contagion mechanic. So the overall goal of the build is to just press Blight, and then pressing the Blight effectively procs Contagion, which will spread my Blight damage to everything, while also proccing Forbidden Rite for some hopefully good single target bossing damage. The noteworthy interaction so far that I've found is that Contagion area of effect is much better than I remember it used to being back in ED Contagion kind of days. And that's because recently the quality on Contagion got changed. So now quality adds base radius. Another nice part of this is that the way Contagion works, the damage Contagion carries through Blight or Essence Drain is not affected by the links on Contagion. And that is supposed to be, I think, so that you can't add damage links to Contagion to further ramp up the damage you get from your Blight or Essence Drain. But what it also means is that the cast when damage taken support 65% less damage doesn't affect the damage that Contagion carries. It reduces the damage of Contagion, the skill itself, but when Contagion is carrying Blight or Essence Drain damage, that is not reduced by cast when damage taken. It's also why I'm only running a level 1 Contagion, because the difference between level 1 and level 20 is only damage. It's the same radius, the same mechanically in every way. So gem levels on Contagion isn't important. That also means that we only have to run a cast when damage taken level 1. At the moment, in my SSF setup, I don't have any quality on that, so I have to take 528 total damage from the hit from Forbidden Rite. But the quality on cast when damage taken now also is just reduced the threshold. So you only need to take a 422 damage hit to proc this on every Forbidden Rite trigger. There's also a possibility to run the transfigured version of Contagion. I think it's Contagion of Transience or Transference or something. It actually has even more radius, more base radius. It also does slightly more damage, which we don't care about, and has a longer cast time, which we don't care about. But the main difference is that the transfigured Contagion transfers on hit rather than mobs dying. Now, I haven't got it yet to test in SSF. I'm not really sure how it works, if it requires a hit to start the chain the first time, or there has to be a hit to make it chain or transfer from each individual mob. I'm not quite sure. If it is just a one hit to start Contagion to do its thing, then that would be a solid AoE upgrade. Another nice interaction here is that because this version of Blight, the transfigured Blight of Contagion, stacks up to 5 times, it actually does significantly more damage per stack. What's nice about this, for clear at least, is that the Contagion carries a stack of Blight, and those Blight stacks stack. So if it makes sense, let's say there's a rare mob surrounded by 5 white mobs, and all of the white mobs, like a Contagion, hits all the white mobs, and then when all of those white mobs die, they will all add 1 stack of Blight to the rare mob, so the rare mob actually gets the full 5 stacks of Blight's worth of damage. Now, for this reason, the clear on this ability is actually quite good, considering my damage is so low at the moment. Especially with the base duration of 4 seconds, it can scale up to 5 seconds with quality. And that means that whatever your tooltip on Blight is, when you are clearing, you can expect to get 5 times that in like on dense kind of maps with rares, and then also 5 times that for the 5-second duration. For the purpose of this build, as a Heirophant, I've actually gone for Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. The main reason is that it scales the base damage more based on your energy shield rather than your life and ES on the normal Forbidden Rite gem. It also has a life cost rather than a mana cost. This doesn't really affect anything that I'm doing at the moment, but it means that this Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice gem can't be used with CI. But the way that I'm playing Forbidden Rite, I wouldn't want CI anyway, because I want to take the chaos damage from triggering Forbidden Rite to trigger my cast when damage taken. And if I was CI, I wouldn't take the damage. From my testing so far, which is really just through the campaign to get to maps, I have found that the build feels okay if you don't have enough energy shield to proc a big enough hit from Forbidden Rite to proc cast when damage taken on every trigger of Forbidden Rite. But once you get to, I think it's about 6,500 ES, and you're assuming you're capped Chaos Res at 75%, with a non-quality cast when damage taken support, you can channel your Blight of Contagion and proc a Contagion on every trigger of Forbidden Rite. The biggest hurdle I've run into so far with this build is dealing with the self damage. You take 40% of your maximum energy shield as chaos damage when you trigger Forbidden Rite, which for me at the moment means I'm taking about a 3100 damage chaos hit 3 times a second, which is quite a lot of damage taken. Now I'm mitigating that with chaos resistance capped at 75%. For this build, I'm also running Heirophant with Divine Guidance for the 10% mind over matter, along with the keystone of 40 to bring the total up to 50. I'm then also taking the Energy Shield Mastery to cause 30% of the chaos damage I take to not bypass Energy Shield. I have the Armor and Energy Shield Mastery to cause 10% of my armor to apply to the chaos damage hit I take. And then with the 50% mind over matter from Heirophant and the keystone, I am splitting the remaining damage 50-50 among life and mana. Because I'm in SSF and don't have any good gear, including and especially Ivory Tower, I'm also running Petrified Blood to try and smooth out some of the damage I take and allow my flasks and my normal regen to keep me alive. But that is the main issue I'm having with the build right now. It either takes too much as a Heirophant to mitigate the damage coming in, and too much investment to try and recover from the damage, because I can't mitigate the damage too much, because what I want is to take, well, if I had 20 quality cast when damage taken, I would want to take 422 damage per trigger of Forbidden Rite, which means that if you count Chaos Res at 75%, means I basically need to get hit for 1700 damage. At the moment, I'm getting hit for much more than that because my ES is so high and my armor is so low. I have been testing Heirophant, the Heirophant version, I guess, of this build as a mana/ES stacker. But unsurprisingly, it kind of sucks because I'm in SSF. I don't have... Ivory Tower would solve basically that entire problem, I think. I wouldn't need to run Petrified Blood. I wouldn't have to run Mind Over Matter. I would have significantly more ES and mana, and all of the chaos damage I took from the self-damage of Forbidden Rite would instead be taken from my mana pool. So I think if I was in trade, this could be quite an interesting build to see how far it would go, especially with access to a lot of like even semi-decent rares and like uniques that I don't have in SSF yet, like Shaper's Touch gloves, to push maybe north of like 15 or even 20k ES, a lot of mana, not have to worry about the damage taken from Forbidden Rite, could get also a lot more AoE by not reserving anywhere near as much mana, and then leveling up and scaling this build into endgame for damage to try and see what that would look like. That is my goal for this league, but I'm going to have to try something else to farm maps more efficiently, to farm up the gear. So that will be what I'm doing next, which is to effectively take this same idea of channeling Blight to proc Forbidden Rite, to get the clear from Blight of Contagion with Contagion, and then hopefully some good bossing damage from a cast when channeling Forbidden Rite setup, But instead of Heirophant, I'll be trying it as a Pathfinder and going poison. Now, the reason for that is because it will allow me to scale a lot more into chaos damage over time multi on the right-hand side of the tree, as well as hopefully alleviating a lot of the issues I've run into as Heirophant. They aren't really issues, I think, that would occur in trade because you have the ability to buy quite good gear and use like really good uniques for Heirophant mana stackers. But I have found getting enough of the kind of raw stats I need gear basically with good prefixes and suffixes. I need life, I need mana, I need a lot of resists, which has created a lot of suffix pressure. I have found it quite difficult to cap all of my elemental resistances and chaos resistances on only a handful of pieces of gear while still trying to get life and mana and intellect and ES and all that kind of stuff. So if I go Pathfinder, a lot of those issues will be alleviated, especially due to having permanent flasks. Like having the permanent Amethyst flask will go a long way to making my gear a lot more flexible in SSF while still capping my chaos res against the Forbidden Rite self-damage. Pathfinder will also hopefully deal with the self-damage that Forbidden Rite does through Petrified Blood with the permanent life flask running. And on top of that, one of the problems that I've also had as Heirophant is figuring out how to get Wither. Now on the left side of the tree, that's quite difficult. As far as I can tell, my only options are to either run Chaos Golem of the Maelstrom, where the Chaos DoT ability thing it does also applies Wither, or to run a Wither spell totem setup. If I wasn't in SSF, another option would be to run something like an Ashes, which would give me quality on Withering Step with Enhance, would allow me to apply, I think, 12 or 13 Wither stacks by just pressing Withering Step, which would be really good. And it would also give me a lot more quality on Contagion to get even more base AoE. One of the nice parts about Contagion so far, especially for like an SSF player like me, is that it has quite good AoE without any real AoE investment or scaling on the tree. I have no AoE nodes at all right now, except for Sanctuary of Thought, which is giving me 16% AoE, which isn't enough to actually go up 0.1 meter radius, so it doesn't affect. I effectively have no AoE scaling at all for Contagion. And even with unleveled, unquality gems, my Contagion has 2.4 meter radius. If I was to get Enhance, maybe even Ashes if I was in trade, and push the quality on Contagion up, maybe even invest a couple of points in AoE nodes on the tree if I was running this Heirophant spell version, where I get value out of the AoE damage from both the Blight damage and the Forbidden Rite damage, then it's actually quite possible to push Contagion north of 4 meters, even 4.5 meter radius, which effectively means that it has like screen-wide AoE. On Pathfinder, that my AoE scaling will be a little bit more limited, but it should still get to a decent spot. Eventually, I'll be farming up an Enhance in probably Uber Lab, and with that, getting 3 meter radius is doable, which is huge, more than enough in my opinion, especially for quite juiced up content in maps. Oh, and yeah, if I was in trade, Heirophant, I believe there's a couple of unique jewels you can get that allow you to apply Wither as well if you didn't want to rely on just Withering Step quality. But on Pathfinder, on the right hand side of the tree, it will also give me a lot of Wither scaling, the increased effect of Wither, as well as the application of Wither, which also should make my damage much better on Pathfinder. Hopefully I haven't missed too much when talking about this idea. If you want to see how the Pathfinder version goes, how they compare, at least for now, probably the next video will just be Pathfinder through the campaign, getting into maps to see how it feels and compares to Heirophant. Subscribe. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and algorithm stuff.